Welcome to Mindful Live 78. It is the 19th of May 2022. Welcome, I'm your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. I am glad that you are here. Well, today, whatever time you're looking at it, because we are streaming live right now, we are streaming live on TikTok, we are streaming live on Instagram, and we are streaming live on YouTube. And the live on YouTube is a special live. You can go over there right now and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer on YouTube, to make sure that when the live leaves and it's no longer live, you could get over there and check it over again. So yeah, head over there, YouTube, Nathan Springer on YouTube. Subscribe if you are looking at it right now on YouTube and you are not yet subscribed. Then I frown at you and I say please do subscribe and hit that like button, and hit that like button regardless of where you are viewing it. If you are viewing it live, hit that like button, get the live out there to more people. Whew. Yeah. So, what we're talking about today, according to what time you're viewing it, is rats. We're talking about rats. Good evening, Curve I good with women that don't beg covertly. I enjoy your words of eloquent words and you preach common knowledge. Well, thank you, Mr. Cybercrime Unit. I feel my suspicions are laid for the moment. I think I need to link that mindful t-shirt. Well, listen, people, you know, I am a horrible promoter. I am not that I said that in the contemplation with the Soul Breeze Bacchanal the other day. I am not the marketing expert. So yeah, the t-shirts and the hats are for sale. Hit me in any one of the DMs. My DMs are open and you could hit up questions and stuff. I do reply once it's nothing down that strange weird line. I do reply, and yeah, hit up. Link if you would like a t-shirt or a hat, let me know. And yes, we're talking about rats, an experiment that was done on rats, and there's some comparison that can be done, that can be seen in humans too. And to start, as I usually do, trying to link that a bit to the contemplation I did today. The contemplation I did today, I don't know how many of you already saw it for the day. Good night, Wendy, Medium Excel. I'm also good with women that don't think that they are entitled to a man, money, time, and resources. Okay, Mr. Nobody care about men. I'm glad. Blessed night, can you trigger? Don't forget to use your promo code MREST21 for 0% off your purchase. Well said, Rooney. Well said. Using those promo codes out there. Limited edition. But before we get over to the rats, something that is actually linked to that is Avatar. That blue alien show that came out in 2009. I don't know how many of you saw it back then, but I remember seeing it back then. I was part of that original crew that got to see Avatar fresh in the cinema with the 3D glasses, and it was actually a 3D movie that was made for 3D, and it felt 3D, and yeah, it was a unique experience back then. I'm sure if we go back and watch it now with modern technology, it might be like, okay, this was aight, but back then it was something. It was good, nice, broke records, beautiful. Everyone was expecting within some kind of recent time, soon time, Avatar must come out with a second one. Wow, never watched it, still haven't. Okay, there are always those out there. Rats are often used to study behavior in psychology experiments. Their brains are larger than mice. Yeah. But it was a wonderful show, a nice peep into a fantasy world. And for a certain age group, like that, especially mid to late teens age group, the millennials back then, their interest was peaked. That was the age group. The millennial generation age group was the age group that made that movie what it was. Beautiful. But now 13 years later, in the year of our Lord 2022, they are now going to release the second Avatar. 13 years later, the general millennial, you look at that 1990 year, maybe they were born, they were 19, it's easy to check with 1990, 19 in 2009, 32 in 2022, and now they come in to bring out the second one when these people are old and supposed to have a family and settle down by now. But as I said in my contemplation, my theory is that millennials don't grow up. At least the generalization of millennials. I mean, of course, there are exceptions to everything. But yeah, my theory is that the millennials don't grow up. And that's why when you look at the movie and entertainment landscape in general, it's almost all nostalgia beat. Everything is nostalgia. Everything is appealing to your coming of age years. Everything is appealing to your coming of age years. Maybe something you viewed as an old show when you were coming of age and now they're sending it back out to you. Everything is appealing to nostalgia. I watch Disney every day. And here's what I'm saying. I am not talking about your ability to still enjoy childish things or cartoons necessarily. That's not what I'm talking about. If this was the generation of Star Wars was the example I drew alongside Avatar. If this was the generation of Star Wars, the first Star Wars, I believe, came out in 1977. 1977. And then by 1980, the second Star Wars was already there. The third Star Wars came out in 1983, I believe. So within 6 years, all of them came out. Well, the first trilogy, so quick, bam. Now, that is a kind of period of time that you get cult following over, because that's somebody's formative years. Those 6 years would be 15 to 21, 20 to 26, your whole college years, 14 to 20, your whole high school years. It's a nice little microcosm of a generational period, that 6 year period where all three of those movies came out. Now, if you think back on those times, 1977, and you think 13 years later than 1977 and 1980, if the first Star Wars came out in 1977 and then they brought out the second one in 1980, those children who looked at Star Wars at the first one at the age of 14, they would have been 27 by the time that's done. Yes, 27. And back then in 1980, if you were 27, you already had 3 children. And yes, you may still be entertained by such a movie, but just by the nature of how life has progressed, that's not the period of life you would still be in. But much of the millennials are still in the period of life where they are single. They are, for all intents and purposes, single. Lots of millennials, and that's a unique thing for our generation as compared to generations before. And that singleness, I know many people may have some controversy with that, and you don't get your identity from someone else, and you're independent and whole all on your own, and you know yourself and all of that beautiful stuff. And I agree, you do you, person, you are wonderful on your own. However, the general common human experience that has been the human experience since humans have been experiencing experiences is that, by and large, what you aim to do biologically is pair up, and we generally pair up lifetime pairing by and large, and you make a family. And usually you do it way before, well, not way before, but usually it's well before 30. Now, the question I said in my contemplation is it that the millennials refuse to grow up, or is it that they aren't allowed to grow up? Because there is a reality when you look out there and you see how a lot of this system is structured. There's a reality where it seems like they are training millennials and shepherding millennials into, you will own nothing and you will be happy. It's the it's convenient for the older generation that millennials are seen as too immature, too irresponsible to have any serious portfolio there. We cannot give them a mortgage. We could only allow them to rent, even though it's the same price. I know many people complain about that. The mortgage and the rent is the same price, and they would only allow you to do the rent. We can't allow you to get the mortgage to own your own home. Life is a circle, but the condition of our minds is a hell of a thing, says Oneness over on IG. Yeah. So, is it that the systems that be, the powers that be, is it that they are working against this younger generation and they are forcing them into this extended childhood in order to keep them in that consumer position? Because a child is just a consumer. A child is a consumer. And if they could extend your childhood perpetually, forever, you're forever a child, would they be able to get more consumerism out of you and in turn make you into basically a modern day serf, a modern day pleb, where they control you and all your labor, all your surplus labor goes to them? Is it on the millennial generation side they refuse to grow up, or is it on the systemic side that they force them into not being able to grow up by making the system so hard for them to create families, etc., etc.? These studies need to invest in sure hits built-in trilogies that milk it. We were the generation that had the foundation and the technological era. We know the best of both, a kind of arrested development. Yeah, agree with all of that. This is coming in a bit delayed there. Making me feel to go get a wife and start a family. Yes, no lies. Good night, Alan Neptune. Yeah. And let's get into the study. And the study, I think, maybe answers those questions maybe a little much. It doesn't answer those questions, but it provides an interesting perspective on some of those questions. Let's get into exactly this little rat study and what it was about. The article that I'm getting it from, you could get it nearly anywhere. It's all about the internet. You could get the literal readout of the live study, etc., etc. But this article, for the purpose of this video that I'm using, is from The Scientist. Universe 25. Ooh. What a name, Universe 25. Hey, good night, Elizabeth Natasha Surratt. As per usual, for anyone inside of the live viewing it on Instagram or viewing it on TikTok, you can go over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube, and you can catch the lives there whenever you like. On replay, slow it down, speed it up, listen it again, whatever you like to do. The powers at be are just trying to hold on to a world that will not be there in a decade. All right. Universe 25, 1968 to 1973. A series of rodent experiments showed that even with abundant food and water, personal space is essential to prevent social or societal rather collapse. June 22nd, 1972, John Calhoun stood over the abandoned husk of what had been a thriving metropolis of thousands. Now the population had dwindled to just 122, and soon even those inhabitants will be dead. Calhoun wasn't the survivor of a natural disaster or a nuclear meltdown. Rather, he was a researcher at the National Institute of Mental Health, conducting an experiment into the effects of overcrowding on mouse behavior. The results laid bare at his feet had taken years to play out. In 1968, Calhoun had started the experiment by introducing 4 mouse couples into a specially designed pen, a veritable rodent garden of Eden. So the idea was that he would introduce mice into a controlled setting where, yes, this is the mouse utopia experiment that we are talking about. This is the mouse utopia. So this is the guy who did it, and getting into the specifics of it. He introduced the mice basically into a utopia. All it lacked was space, but within the confined space they had everything they needed: unlimited food, unlimited water, they were kept healthy, etc., etc., etc. It was mouse heaven, in other words. The only scarce resource in this microcosm was physical space, and Calhoun suspected that it was only a matter of time before this caused trouble in paradise. Calhoun had been running similar experiments with rodents for decades, and he did it over and over and over. That's why this is called Universe 25. Now, it was a bad time to be a rodent. To be honest, it's never really a good time to be a rodent. They have a hard, short, difficult life. Yes. Tough luck for the rodents. But 25 universes later, he got this, and I believe he did it even after that too. But this was the one that he finally got to run to completion. All of the rest were not able to be completed. As he had anticipated, the utopia became hellish nearly a year in, when the population density began to peak, and then population growth abruptly and dramatically slowed. Animals became increasingly violent, developed abnormal sexual behaviors, and began neglecting or even attacking their own pups. Calhoun termed this breakdown of social order a behavioral sink. Now, if you look at the behavior of these mice and compare it to the behavior of the typical people who inhabit much of humanity's cities, what we may generally call the more liberal side of the political spectrum, the most liberal side of the political spectrum by and large inhabits cities. Now, that is kind of understandable that by and large more liberal people inhabit cities, because in order to inhabit a city, you can't be overly individualistic. You have to be much more okay with living with people very close to you. Now, yeah, whatever, cool. You can look at that and then compare some of these symptoms to some of the behaviors you see coming out of some cities, and you could understand where the comparisons come from. Animals became increasingly violent. That's one. Is that true for cities? They developed abnormal sexual behaviors. Is that true for cities? And began neglecting or even attacking their own pups. Is that true for cities? Eventually, Universe 25 took another disturbing turn. Mice born into the chaos couldn't form normal social bonds or engage in complex social behaviors such as courtship, mating, and pup rearing. Instead of interacting with their peers, males compulsively groomed themselves. Females stopped getting pregnant. Effectively, says Ramsden, they became trapped in an infantile state of early development. Even when removed from Universe 25 and introduced to normal mice, ultimately the colony died out. There is no recovery, and that's what was so shocking. Yeah. Now, here's where this gets even more creepy if you're following this. All right, those previous behaviors are what they said the mice that were originally put into the enclosure, that's the behavior they got inside of there. I'm getting to that, you know, Rooney, I'm getting to that. Because the city, I'm using the city because that's where you would see the behavior heightened and most noticeable. But the overcrowding of modern humanity is all about the place. A lot of people live way too close to each other. The one way you see that probably most is when you hear government make housing for people. Government always makes those slum style housing for people where you stack them on top of each other. Who on earth thought Maloney was a good idea? Where's that guy? Where's that guy? I'd like to speak to the guy that looked up a plan, thought up Maloney, and said, stacking people in there is a good idea. I'd like to speak to whoever that was. Massimo Original, I am no city, however, this would be in conflict with some of the happiest cities in the world, such as Helsinki, Oslo, Amsterdam, and Stockholm. I think it has mainly to do with urban design. We'll actually get to some of that also, Mr. Massimo. But even the happiest cities in the world are compared to other cities. So granted, yes, I wouldn't doubt that there are people very happy living in cities. And bear in mind, what they're talking about here is the behavior of the people the behavior of the mice in the overcrowded area. They aren't saying whether they were happy or not. They aren't testing the mice to see happiness or sadness. Maybe they were very happy in some of those situations, because here's where we're getting to. Not just the mice who were put into the enclosure now, the mice that were born. So these are the second generation mice. These are the millennial mice, the mice that were born into this perfect utopian setting. You see, the millennials, I'm speaking in the West, obviously there are people still starving all about the world, but by and large in Western countries, we haven't had real starvation in any of these countries for a very long time. Yeah, many people talk about poverty, but usually it's a relative poverty issue if people really want to be honest. We are at the stage where there are people who are very poor and homeless in Western civilizations, in Western countries, and they are overweight. So we understand what we are talking about here. And then you're talking about the millennial generation that was born into this having everything. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the statement of the hard times make hard men make good times make weak men make hard times business. So in the good times that is created, the generation that is born into it, the generation that is born into it, because this is what they are speaking about here. Mice born into the chaos couldn't form social bonds. Is this true of generations born into this utopian social system that we have? Cannot form social bonds or engage in complex social behaviors such as courtship, mating, and pup rearing. You see, that's the thing. That's the thing that some of the older people may not be able to put into words, but some of the things that they are worried about with the modern social media and how many people are treating modern life. What they are doing is making it very difficult for them to actually engage in the regular human behaviors that you need to engage in to interact with humans. And then we are surprised now, as you're saying rightfully, they talk heavy about the increase in mental illness in many of the younger generations. So many of them are so depressed, so many of them are suicidal. There are hard statistics that you could look at that makes you wonder, okay, this generation has so many things better. Why do they seem to be so much more distressed than generations who grew up without a color television? Well, maybe those generations, I was watching even on TikTok, they were showing some old lime from that wasn't on TikTok, I think that was on Instagram, a lime from 1994 on Maracas, I think it was the Ash Wednesday bash or whatever. And you look at the people, and by and large, what you could see the big difference is everyone interacting with each other. Everyone is there just, talking with each other, interacting in all different ways, interacting with each other. But that is so different from modern day. I was watching Dr. Rowley, our Prime Minister over in Guyana, and he had a trip to the Kaicha waterfall. And I was looking at a video from one perspective, and as the video showed everyone in the crowd there, every single person was just on their phone videotaping or messaging someone. And oh gosh, I know it could sound like an old person there, but I'm thinking to myself, why don't they get one good camera person to record them and the waterfall, and it would be there, we could all share the video with each other, and take my own self, the cameraman, take a picture with me and the waterfall, so I don't have to be on my phone, for us all to have the same video of the same waterfall, and we could actually experience it with our eyes. Like, I found that kind of strange. Massimo Original over on Instagram says, not with regards to that, would that not be mainly attributable to societal norms enforced by the mice themselves, or is there some sort of pre-birth genetic issue that played due to the original mice? Okay, now the exact why of this isn't explained here, and it's very difficult to explain, and this is kind of the problem. This is the conservative versus progress argument, in a sense, that there are so many things extremely complex that go into our interactions that we tamper with them at our own peril. So we don't know what some changes are going to cause, because we don't know how certain societal things are formed. All right, so here's an example. Breastfeeding. Like, some people speak negatively of breastfeeding in the modern context, and I understand there are complexities with it. But it wasn't until not too long ago that it was recognized that there's a feedback loop in breastfeeding where changes in the child's body are received at nerve endings on the breast, and the milk that the mother produces changes due to that. Now, there was once upon a time no one had any idea that that was something. No one knew that, wait, now there's a whole computer chip inside of the mammary glands out there. No one knew that. No one knew that it changed all the time with the child's needs as the child got ill or anything like that. We didn't know the specifics of it, but someone would have known that, hey, breast milk is the best one for you, you know. Breast milk is the good thing for you. Now, someone may have at some point in time invented the formula and noticed, hey, formula could get women out to work. Women no longer need to breastfeed, and someone runs out there and says, well, no more breastfeeding. Let's say ban that breastfeeding so we get women to be equal in the work market. Grand. And then you notice, well, why are all these children so sickly now? How comes these children are not as strong as they used to be? What happened? Well, you changed something that you shouldn't have changed, something where you didn't know all the ramifications for. Now, if you pile mice or people on top of each other, and that is not what they were created for, either way you want to look at it. If you look at it purely creation, God fully well in the literal sense crafted this with his own hand. He did not craft it with the intention of it living like that. Or if you look at it evolutionarily, which doesn't necessarily negate God either, if you look at it evolutionarily, these creatures didn't evolve with the niche of surviving in these kind of settings. So when you put them in a setting that they were not created, they were not designed to survive in, then they do not survive in it. It's kind of that obvious. It's like you take a fish, put it out of water, and you're wondering, but why isn't the fish living? Well, you took the fish out of where it was designed to live, out of how it was designed to function. And there may have once upon a time been a time where people would not have known that fishes breathe through their gills in the water, and they would not have known. So they took the fish out and said, okay, I think this fish would make a good pet and it would live better outside. All right, grand, take out the fish and carry it here, and the fish dies. Or okay, it needs water, and you put it in a small bowl of water, and then the fish still dies because you don't understand that water runs out of oxygen after a while. And these are things that you don't necessarily know, and a lot of the time people figure out those things after they kill the creature that they were investigating for it. And the problem with that with humans is sometimes we do these changes without fully understanding the ramifications of it. And one of the strange things with that, one of the unique things with that, is the changes happen over a lengthy period of time. So it's not like one generation, one person does it by themselves. It's a progression of something, and then eventually you end up with this. All right. There's more to go into that. All right, let me see if I could just get the summary. Calhoun didn't necessarily think humanity was doomed because he drew the obvious parallels there. He pointed out the parallels between humans and the mouse experiment. He did that since way back then. But he didn't necessarily say that humanity was doomed. In some of Calhoun's other crowding experiments, rodents developed innovative tunneling behaviors, while in others, adding more rooms allowed the animals to live in high-density environments, yada, yada, yada. So, humans aren't rodents. So even with the rodents, some of them realized that, hey, I could tunnel out of this place and create more room downward. Humans are innovative. Humans have the ability to notice the path that we are on and switch the path if we so desire. That's the benefit we have. You could look at what is happening around you and decide to remove yourself from it. according to Calhoun, wanted these findings to influence the architectural design of prisons, mental hospitals, and other buildings prone to crowding. Writing in summary in 1979, Calhoun noted that no single area of intellectual effort can exert a greater influence on human welfare than that contributing to better design of the built environment. So, to some extent, the man was talking about plain old architecture. And there's something called brutalist design. Modern people love it. But I think it was originated in the Soviet Union, and I think it's a kind of Marxist nonsense. I hate it. I don't understand the need to build ugly buildings. I don't understand why our governments build ugly buildings. And that's part of what he was saying there too, that the very design of the buildings that we use could have negative effects. Now, if you think about that overcrowding problem and the psychological, social problems that are created in the mouse experiment with that overcrowding, you could wonder even something as simple as a school that forces children into a very crowded setting and keeps them there 8 hours a day continuously for 5 days a week for years. Is there a negative effect of that nature of schooling? Is that something that is required? Is that how we are supposed to function? It could very well be that some of these children are not functioning in school because they shouldn't be locked up in that tiny area. There's an example. Boys, now you know I like my generalizations, so it's a generalization, obviously there's a difference. But males are generally better at spatial awareness. So the space that they have, they are better aware of it. And in some cases, you might say that they need a bigger physical space because of it. Men are often more territorial than women. They need larger space. Blah, 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 blah. Now, is it a fact now that it might be young boys in schools in these tight classrooms forced to sit right next to people cannot function in that small area as well as the young ladies can, as the girls can? And as we are seeing, girls are outperforming boys in the schooling. It seems obvious to me that the nature of the schooling and the setup of the schooling system is more suited to girls than little boys. Now, it may very well be that it isn't even suited to little girls either. It's just that they are better able to cope with that kind of nonsense. I think that may have good investigation to look into it. It may be a good investigation to look into. Now, there have been many discussions on experiment going in depth, and different people have different opinions on it. Now, one of the main groups that came out of this were the beautiful ones. That's what they called the group, the beautiful ones. All they cared about was keeping themselves beautiful. They cleaned themselves all day, groomed themselves all day, ate and slept. They didn't have any children. They didn't engage in mating activities. They didn't socialize properly. That was a big factor inside of this. And eventually, they died out. Now, true, yes, oh gosh, yeah, the commie blocks. I generally find it abhorrent. However, I will say there are, in my opinion, beautiful examples of it. To me, it's not all bad. I agree, not all is bad. Brutalism was once actually seen as a bastion of progressive thought, as it rejected the sanitized look of classicism with the Rocco style and similar. I think it was progressive because it was neo-Marxist, to be very honest, and slightly communist. That's why it was progressive, if you ask me. But anyway, the rich auntie, those were the red woman mice. And the strange thing to me is it seems a lot like modern society encourages people to do that very thing. And these mice, they said, were in a perpetual state of, as it were, childhood. They were juveniles. The mice, although they aged, they didn't mature. So they still acted like juveniles. Now, isn't that comparable to what we started speaking about with the millennial generation also, where the millennial generation is much more obsessed with their own self-image than probably any generation ever before, and the millennial generation is also less interested in reproducing. They were saying that, and this statistic isn't as a result of people being more religious or being more prudish. It's just less interest. The millennial generation has been, well, I think it's not just the millennial. It's getting worse with Gen Z going down. Has been one generation where they are seeing virgins last older and older and older. And it's not because they're waiting till marriage. They have less interest in sexual intercourse. Gen Z is having way less sex than any generation before them. They literally have less interest in it. That's why there's an A in LGBTQIA+. Is asexual, they aren't interested in it. The testosterone level of men, and let me see if I could pull that up as I talk about it. The testosterone level of men dropped in the last couple decades. The testosterone, a 60-year-old man in 2004 had testosterone levels 17% lower than those of a 60-year-old man in 1987, and that was in 2004. It has dropped even more now. I think it's something like 40 to 60%. Some of these young men you're seeing out here acting, oh, that boy acting like a woman, so it's because their testosterone levels have literally dropped. They are chemically different than they were before, and it may be something that we have done with the society. Maybe we have put them into the utopian society, and now you could juxtapose that with some of the people that believe that the secret to getting children to behave properly, and the reason we have disciplinary problems in society right now is because the children aren't treated best. They have to be coddled, and you're okay, and you're beautiful, and you're important, and you're worth it, and you're worth it, and you're gorgeous, and you're beautiful, and no one could tell you you're not, and you're smart, and you deserve this. You deserve this. Don't let anyone tell you anything. No, that may very well be the wrong thing. That's why we are ending up with all these beautiful ones that are only interested in grooming themselves, eating good food, and sleeping. Now, maybe that's fine, and their generation will just die out. But if you're looking for the betterment of people, well, I'd say that's kind of important. I'm looking for another interpretation. Right, so there were other interpretations. Now interpretations of Calhoun's work has changed. English Article explains that the habitats he created weren't really overcrowded, but that isolation enabled aggressive mice to stake out territory and isolate the beautiful ones. She writes, instead of a population problem, one could argue that Universe 25 had a fair distribution problem. Now, I could give you all one guess to guess the kind of person this person is in their political beliefs. Their belief was that it wasn't an overcrowding problem. Aggressive mice took out too much territory, and they isolated the beautiful. Well done, Kuvon. Well done. It's only those kinds that think like that. Like, the only reason this happened that way is because some mean person took too much land and took too much, and because they didn't distribute it fairly, that's why. Well, that's the problem in that. The problem with that is, in this experiment, the mice were given all the food they needed. The only limiting factor was the crowding. There was another interpretation that I found interesting. Though Calhoun's research was seen not only as questionable but also as dangerous, another researcher, John Freeman, turned to studying actual people. They were just high school and university students, but definitely human. His work suggested a different interpretation. Moral decay could arise not from density, but from excessive social interaction. Ramsden says not all of Calhoun's rats had gone berserk. Those who managed to control space led relatively normal lives. So it wasn't just a matter of the space itself, but more of a matter of too much social interaction. Now, here's the problem with that. What is social media doing? If the problem isn't the density in and of itself, that being and seeing the fellow rats, that's not what is sending them berserk. But too much social interaction, too many rats talking to me, too many mice talking to me, and that's exactly it. Curve on, they're distorting reality. Because here's the thing, it's a kind of strange thing. I hope you could follow me when I'm saying this, because it could seem kind of strange. Speech defines our reality. We think the way we talk. How we understand what we see is through speech. And what we see is dependent on the way we experience the world. There are billions of facts. So right now, in the picture you're looking at right now, there are billions of different things you could be looking at, and your eye could focus on a few things at a time. So even how you spoke in life, what we are commonly saying to each other, how we experience interacting with each other, kind of tells us all the social cues. And when you're looking at me right now, you very likely may all be looking at a similar thing. So I raise my hand, most of you would look at that. I raise this hand, most of you would look at that, because what we have learned through our own experiences growing up and interacting with each other is would be those common things. Now, too much social interaction could distort reality, because everyone's varied reality, and everyone does have a varied reality. Different cultures have varied realities. Different cultures have varied ways they see the world. And when you have all of that forcing itself in at the same time, you end up with what they call postmodernism. Postmodernism is basically the idea that there's no one true way to see anything. You could always look at it from another angle, and every reality is just a subjective reality. There's no truth. So anything could be anything. And I think, yeah, the excess social interaction might actually have something to do with that. You see, here's a problem with a lot of this. You does really talk with your hands. Yeah, I do. I know. That's kind of on purpose too. Because communication, they see, what is it? Like 90% of communication is non-verbal. So by me communicating with my hands, you better understand what I'm saying. So yeah, you can see in the illustration in cartoons, anything is anything. Correct. Now, here's the problem with a lot of that when it comes to humans. When it comes to humans, the beautiful ones, the ones that got overly aggressive, the ones that, by the way, many of the mice were throwing, the mice that did manage to get pregnant threw away their babies much more often. They deserted their babies much more often. They killed their babies much more often. Just by the way, take of that what you may. Take of that what you may. But one of the problems with humans is that we can justify anything. So we are not mice. When the beautiful ones in the humans, I'm supposing here, I'm not saying this is for sure the reality, but if there be beautiful ones among the humans that are heading down that direction of only self-image and interested in your own vanity and your own self, and then just dying with that, not interested in any furthering from that, if that be so, those beautiful ones aren't just going to groom and sleep and not think about it. They will figure out philosophies to justify what they are doing. They will figure out philosophies to justify what they are doing. You see, by and large, we do it and then we explain why we do it. That's how humans function. There's scientific proof to prove that too. A very interesting study, and I find this has a nice parallel along with this mouse study too. It draws some interesting parallels also, to me. At least to me, it draws some of those. Insights into the psychology of decision making from a split brain mind. Where do our decisions come from? It's an odd question, yada yada. where else could they come from but our own heads? If we're to get more specific, we likely think of the self, a single decision maker residing in our heads, commanding our choices. The brain is a hyper-connected organ, and ordinarily the brain's two hemispheres are in constant conversation, sharing information through the band of fibers known as the corpus callosum that connects your left brain with your right brain. So yes, your brain is split into two hemispheres. In case you didn't know that, now you know that. Right, good. In rare circumstances, however, this band of fibers connecting hemispheres is surgically severed. The surgery leaves the person with two distinct sides of the brain that are unable to communicate. Observations of this clinical population known as split brain patients provide a fascinating glimpse into our psychology. They force us to confront these intuitions about a unified sense of self and a centralized decision maker. Unable to communicate, one hemisphere often takes actions based on information that the other doesn't have access to. For example, you can selectively instruct the right hemisphere to get up and talk to the kitchen, or walk to the kitchen rather. But when you ask the person, why did you get up? Only the language dominant left hemisphere has the linguistic capability to respond. The left hemisphere has no idea, but what's interesting is that the person never just says, I don't know. Instead, without hesitation, the person makes up a reason, or your brain makes up a reason on the spot. Oh, I just felt like stretching my legs a bit, that's all. Or, oh, I wanted to look out the window. Are you all understanding what is going on there? So this person's brain is severed. The right side of your brain controls your movement and what you're going to do, while the left side of the brain controls the linguistics, controls you speaking. So you can artificially, as it were, but selectively instruct the right side of the brain to do an action. So you instruct the right side of the brain, walk to the kitchen. So the person gets up and walks to the kitchen. But the left side of the brain has no connection to the right side of the brain now because their brain is severed. This is someone with that surgery. Their brain is severed. You ask the person, why did you get up and go to the kitchen? Now, if it was connected, maybe they would be able to check back on the right side and notice, maybe I don't really have a justified reason, and they might say, I'm not really sure. But with the left side being separate, the left side has no information. The left side has no idea why they got up. But the left side justifies a reason. That's how the brain works. And it's kind of understandable. In that sense, it's not really that the brain is being dishonest as much as the brain is filling in the blanks. It's like when your eyes capture an image. I did a contemplation on that not too long ago. Your eye doesn't see the entirety of the room. Your eye actually captures very little of what is happening in front of you. But when you play back that thought in your head, or when you think about the image that you saw, you think of it as a complete image. You think of it as a complete image. Now, the problem with that is that things deeper inside of our psyche. This is the problem that I'm getting to with this split brain thing. Things deeper inside of our psyche can trigger actions inside of us that our left brain then attempts to justify at a human logical level, while that logical justification has nothing to do with the reasoning behind why we're doing what we're doing. So you could have some people, some humans, starting to display actions of the beautiful ones, and really and truly it's a deep set instinct that is triggering because you are not living in line with how your body, the human body, and the human as an entity was designed to live. You're not living like that, so you're seeing the results of that. And instead of you saying, well, it's because of me not living like that, you don't have that knowledge, you don't know that, you're going to find a justifiable reason, and then you could invent a whole university section, a whole university realm of study to study all your justifications for things that you're doing that are just triggers of living in a sub-ideal environment. Is that connection found in autistic children? Yes, it is found in autistic children, but there could be problems with the connections. Now, with everyone, you see, people are on a wide range of differences. Who knows what happens with different people connections? The thing is, sometimes that happens to us too, where we have the connection all functional there, but we make a decision and we don't even know where the origin of the decision was, and the left side of our brain gives us the idea that we know where the origin of that decision was, but no, we really didn't. It's easy to see this behavior as nonsensical. However, the interpreter isn't limited to split brain patients. It's often true of us all. Consider the following scenario. You're shown an array of stockings hanging on a wall and asked to pick which ones you like the best. You scan the collection and make your selection. After you're asked why you picked those particular stockings, you respond with whatever comes to mind: the color, the quality of the fabric, the design, or any such combination. This was the setup for a famous experiment by Richard Nesbitt and Timothy Wilson. They found that participants are actually much more likely to choose the stockings on the far right of the array. Even when the stockings are identical, the ones on the right are chosen with alarming regularity. However, when asked why they made this decision, nobody ever says, "I just picked the ones on the right." Like the ignorant left hemisphere, we're blind to this factor. Instead, we make up an explanation to justify it after the fact. So, the problem with that, when you compare that and combine that with the mouse utopia experiment with Universe 25, when some of these actions start to happen among our population, we don't necessarily know where they come from. Yo, interesting. Wow, it's been a while and you're late, bro. We don't necessarily know where they come from. A lot of the problems that are surfacing right now with the identity issues that it seems like much of the modern world is really struggling with. No one knows their identity anymore. And we have all kinds of sophisticated explanations to explain this and figure it out. But who is to say that we aren't explaining from the end going back to the front? And we aren't justifying an action that is actually just a reaction from an environmental change that we enacted. How do we know? How would we know? All right. That's all I have for now, folks. I'm going to stay on TikTok for a little while after. We'll have a little after live talk over on TikTok, Massimo Original. You know, this is interesting because it really makes you consider what exactly constitutes freedom of will, or are we all just bound to the limitations of our biology? Very good question, Massimo. Very, very good question. But yes, for you folks over on YouTube, I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, and tune in again. Today is Thursday. Tune in again tomorrow night, 9:30 for the next Mindful Live, and I will see you then.